Again, how to get an A on our Geometry Chapter 1 test. The first 6 problems over 1.1, you guys have all the, in your notes, you have all your definitions of plane, line, segment, and all that. You also have, along with it, the most important thing to be looking at right now is how to name things. On the quiz, it was kind of a hot mess. Now, number 1 says, name this plane. And our plane's got a capital M on it. It says give another name for plane M. M is the name of the plane because it doesn't have a dot. It's not a point, it's the plane name. Any capital letter hanging out is meant to be the name of a plane. Now, besides using a lone capital letter, what if you don't have, how else could we do it? You have to pick up 3 other points that are on the plane. So you could call this plane X, Y, N, or you could call this plane Z, Y, X. Say it again. And XY. Any combination of those 4 points. So basically this, 3 of these 4 points written in a group. 3 of these 3 points written in a group. Not separated by comma, written in a group. If you had commas on it, take them out. 3 of these 3 points could name that point, or name that plane. Number 2, name a line in the plane. Well, just like our capital M is a plane name, a little lowercase letter is meant to be a line name. And I see actually, it says name a line in the plane. Well, I noticed this line H goes through the plane. So the best one for what's in the plane is gonna be line G, line lowercase g. Now, the other name that you could put for line lowercase g would be, you could call it line XZ, notation across the top. Without the notation, the answer will be marked wrong. Line XZ, or you could call it line YZ, or you could call it Z. Oh, we got XZ. XY? XY. There we go. Or line XY. Again, without the notation across the top, it will be marked wrong. That's what says read it as line XZ. The only way that we would name a line differently is if there's a lowercase letter.
The arrows got to be on both ends.
The arrows have to be on both ends to show it's a line. Number 3, now we're talking about this line that's intersecting the plane, the idea that this one's going down through the middle. That one we can call line lowercase h. Or we could name this line, it's got 2 points on it. We could also call it PY or YP. But those are the only 2 letters, or only 2 ways you can name that line. PY or YP and line lowercase h. One thing I noticed is that some people you print and you don't necessarily use capital letters. Like you're printing, you just kind of stay away from capital letters. Make sure you're writing capitals here. Like I had some students that just always write lowercase. I kind of print cursive, but I always have to make sure that these look like they're lowercase or capital. Don't get fancy in how you're writing about them. Now, number 4 says name 2 rays. Well, a ray has one endpoint and goes on in one direction. That's what the notation looks like over it. I could go and grab ray YP from Y to P. That's shooting up, going on and on. I'm going to consider it to be ending right there at Y. So I'm just cutting off part of it and saying, let me talk about this ray. I could do the same thing on my line G. I could put this line G, I could start at Y, ignore the left side of Y, and say I've got a ray from Y to Z. I could also ignore the right side and say I've got a ray from Y to X. And notice, regardless of the direction of my ray, I'm still writing the notation the same. Endpoint, single arrow. And again, the notation is huge. It's what it's all about. I can name a pair of opposite rays. It's actually going to be on this line G. I can talk about how from Y, I have ray YZ going to the right, and opposite that would be this YX going to the left. Opposite rays share a common endpoint. Number 6, name a point that's not in the plane. There's only one point that's hanging out above the plane because it's on this line H going through it. P's not in there. P would be like up on top of it. It's like this is going through the paper. I can even go like this. And line P is up there going through the plane. Or, I'm sorry, not going through the plane. Name a point not in plane M. I expect just a single uppercase letter for points. This was stuff that, like, what questions might you guys have on this? This was stuff that I was just kind of surprised you missed out on the notations. Jess. Okay, so you use the P for number 1. P actually, now do you understand how I'm saying that P's not in there? It's going through. So that would be the reason why we wouldn't use a P there. Better? Other stuff. Question is how come I can't use P here? Well, we decided down here P wasn't in the plane. Now I'm going to go on to number 7, 8, and 9. In problem number 7, I had done this with a couple people that asked me questions. You look at what the question's asking. Find X to Z. You can take a yellow marker or something and highlight it. X to Z is the whole thing. In number 8, X to Z is a little part over here. Just kind of highlighting there. And so for these, in number 7, X to Z is the entire segment. So the measure of XZ equals 17 plus 24. I think that's 41. Cool. So this is part plus part equals whole. You need to show me the math you're doing. Now over here, we know the whole and we have a part. We have a missing part. So for number 8, X to Z is going to be, take the whole thing, 38 minus 27, and that's 11. And then we had examples of those in our notes packet too. Use your notes packet examples as models of how your answers need to be presented. You can use your notes. You can use your notes. Make sure that you're familiar with your notes. Make sure that you're not digging through. Look through it all today. Make sure that everything after school today, look through it all and make sure everything is accurate. If you need anything from me on your notes, get in here tomorrow morning and ask. Number 9. In number 9, we had to go to graphing something, plotting, and finding whether or not segments are congruent. In this one, let's see. I've got segment. We got to decide if segment A, B, and C, D are congruent. Segment A, B goes through, I just pulled a hair out of my head. Segment A, B goes through 8, negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, negative 4, there's A, 3, negative 4, there's B. I'm going to stop off right now and write that segment AB is 5 units. You can put that right on your graph, but I need to see what the measure is. Then they want us to plot CD, which is 7 and 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Up 1, there's my C. 7 and negative 3 is my D. CD equals 4. These two guys are not congruent. Now remember that if you do wind up with congruence, and this was something too that I missed, that I think people missed on the quiz, is just not writing down what was what. I'm going to refresh your memory here, you guys. Page 11 in your notes, we had examples of problems like that. Page 11 in your notes, extra practice 1 through 3, we had problems like that. What do they look like if they are congruent? Jessica had a question. Go ahead. So the difference between, why am I not putting a segment notation here? Because I'm putting a number after it. I'm putting a number after it to represent a measure. So when I put a equal sign and a number to represent a measure, I don't use the segment notation, and I want to take you to the page where we talked about that. That was all on page 10. When do I use equal to? When I'm putting a number by it. When do I say congruent? And you see the differences is when I'm talking about stating they're congruent, I just put the segment notation over the top. That's all page 10. Make sure that you've got that sorted out. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I use it as a starting off point. When we graph another thing, I'll show you again. Now, using midpoint and distance. Now, we separated when we practiced midpoint and distance. We did it separately. I taught you guys midpoint one day. It was last week, Wednesday or Thursday. And then when we came back together this week, I taught you about how to find distance. So in number 10, hopefully you read the directions because it was asking for two different things. So 10 and 11. S is -2 and 4. T is 3 and 9. The first thing that I need to do is find its midpoint. I'm going to go find its midpoint by adding together the x values. The midpoint x value is the average of the two x's. -2 plus 3 divided by 2 is going to give me a half. Taking the two x values and finding their average. Then I take the two y values and find their average. The y value of the midpoint, 4 plus 9 divided by 2, that's going to be 13 over 2. That's 6.5. So then the end midpoint for this problem then, what point is halfway between S and T on the coordinate plane? A half and 6.5. And you could have that as a decimal, no problem. Now, that's what is between those points. That's all my midpoint work. But then how far apart is the question of distance. So here's all my midpoint work. Distance is going to come from our setup of, let's go find out the how far aparts and square them, add them, take the square root. I'm going to put my little XY table together. The points were -2, 4, and 3, 9. And then I say, how far apart is each? Well, 3 minus -2. These guys are 5 units apart. 9 minus 4. These guys are 5 units apart. So the distance is going to come from the formula, the square root of 5 squared plus 5 squared. That's going to be the square root of 50. And that works out to be about 7 point something. I'm not sure. If you guys could give me that answer on your calculator, I'd appreciate it. And it is a segment, but again, I'm not putting segment notation because I'm putting a numerical measure at the end. Anybody got it? 07? Yep, that sounds familiar to me too. So be careful when you're looking through your test. The distance and midpoints are put together on one particular question like this one is. So number 11, same idea. I got to get distance and midpoint on ST. S in number 11 is 6 and -3. T on number 11 is 7 and -2. First things first. What's my x value of the midpoint? I'm going to find the average of the two x's. 7 plus 6 is 13 over 2. 6.5 again? Huh, interesting. Then to find the y value of the midpoint, y of the midpoint is -3 plus -2. Average of those two numbers, that's going to be -5 divided by 2. That's going to be -2.5. And so then my midpoint of S and T is going to be the ordered pair 6.5, -2.5. And of course, you could have those as 0.5s. There's our midpoint. Now, the rest of it is take that ordered pair and what is the, how do I like set a marker down and lose it all like right here? Here it is. Next thing is, here's all our midpoint work for this problem. We need to get the length now, the distance. How long is S to T? And I set up my little radical and my squares, make my little XY table, and take the shortcut through distance formula. How far apart? 1. How far apart? 1. 1 squared plus 1 squared is going to be the square root of 2. And the square root of 2, if I remember right, I think it's 1.41. Cool. So ST is approximately that 1.41. Midpoint and distance, again, will be grouped together. Now, problem 12, this is a little bit different here because what we're given in 12 is the midpoint of a segment and one endpoint. I saw some people still writing this, but I'm going to switch now. In problem 12, the way this reads is, and if you're working on line paper, I would absolutely just be jotting these things down as I do it. The midpoint of JK, segment JK, is 6,3. So here's the thing. I've got this segment J and K, and the midpoint, they're telling me, is the 6,3. Now, they also tell me, this number line is kind of goofy because now that I'm looking at the numbers they give me for J, they also tell me that J is 14 and 9, and K is unknown. Find the coordinates of K. Now, this is where you have to sort out what they're given. This question on the test, I saw a lot of people kind of set it up right, but then at the same time, put some numbers in the wrong place. If you guys remember from the problems that I just was doing, when I was coming in and writing out how to find the midpoint of X, I was putting an X sub midpoint. The midpoint of this has to be 6. Well, what is it that has to be 6? It's got to be the average of 14 and this missing X. 14 plus X, when I divide by 2, has to give me 6. So, and I think I'm actually putting my midpoint on the left side. I'm just sort of mimicking how I was doing it here when I was in a different situation. So with this one, you guys can see the difference. I know the midpoint, one endpoint of X. I'm missing the other one. Now, how do you undo dividing by 2? Multiply both sides by 2. So the left side's going to turn into 12. 12 equals, the 2 divides out on the right. 12 equals 14 plus X. Take 14 away. X is going to be -2. Now, there's my -2 plus 14 averages to 6. Makes sense. 14 minus 2 is 12. 12 divided by 2, there's my 6. To do the y's, idea is the same. I know that the y value of the midpoint is 3. One of the endpoints has a y value of 9. I have a missing one on the other side. When I average 9 in that missing one, I get 3. I undo my multiplication by, I undo my division by multiplying. 6 equals 9 plus W. W, that's a Y. Take 9 away from both sides. -3 equals Y. My missing endpoint, K, is -3, or I'm sorry, -2 and -3. Undoing, dividing by 2 to get that average formula out of there. Absolutely expect a problem like that. And you guys notice when I drew this, like my numbers on it didn't make a lick of sense, but you got the idea that it was these two pairs that had to average up to what was in the middle. Like it doesn't make any sense like as a number line, but these two pairs had to average up to get what was in the middle. In our other problems, we knew the pairs and had to find what was in the middle. Now problem 13, this one's kind of got a lot going on too. I'm going to draw 13. I suggest you do the same. Point M is the midpoint of AB. M, A, B. I can show that that's the midpoint and those are congruent by dropping these congruent markings there. Point M is the midpoint of segment AB. Then they go on and tell us that AM is 3x plus 8 and MB, bless you, is 6x minus 4. And the directions say find the length of A to B. So in the end, I've got to know exactly how long this is. Now, the problems that we did before weren't written, they were drawn for you like this. They weren't written out, it was drawn for you. Like we've got a whole handful of them on page 16 in our notes. Page 16 in our notes, numbers 4 through 6. We had a whole bunch of problems like that, but they were drawn for us, not just told to us like this. Now, how do we go and solve this problem? Well, if M is the midpoint, I can set both of these equal to each other. 3x plus 8 equals 6x minus 4. Now, there's different ways you can go about solving this. I'm going to start by taking 3x over to the other side. I'm going to gather my x's up on the right. I can start this a bunch of different ways, but that's how I'm going to choose to start it. On the left side, I'm left with 8 equals 6x's minus 3x's is going to be 3x, and I still have this minus 4 out here. Once I get to there, I add 4 to both sides. 12 is equal to my 3x's. I divide both sides by 3 and find out that x is 4, but I'm not done. I have to go back and use it. Find out my x is 4, and then I have to use it. So I've got to go into my calculator, or maybe my mental math can get this for me. What is 3 times 4 plus 8? 12 and 8, yep, that's 20. This side better be 20 as well. 6 times 4 minus 4, that side's 22. 20 as well. So how long is A to B? 20 plus 20 is 40. And again, we saw these mostly presented as drawings. And if you're not given a drawing, you got to interpret the information in writing and draw it up like I did for this one. Moving on to number 14 and 15. These were perimeter and area problems. Perimeter and area problems. Had to have them graphed in the coordinate plane. Number 14. The polygon that they're giving us is WX, it's a quadrilateral, WXYZ. 5, -1 is W. X is sitting at 5 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. WX. Y is at 2, -1. Z is at 2 and 6. So once we get that drawn up, I like that little rectangle there. I don't want to do it with my marker. I feel like I'm going to draw it really bad. Uh-huh. Oh, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. Now, to get the perimeter and area, we got to figure out how long are the sides. Here you go on the counting. To get the perimeter and area, we've got to figure out how long the sides are. Now, from Z to X is 1, 2, 3 units. That makes Y to W 1, 2, 3 units. X to W 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units. Z to Y would be the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units. To find the perimeter, perimeter is distance around. I've got 2 sides that are length of 3 and 2 sides that are length of 7. It's going to be 6 plus 14. The perimeter is 20. Area is space inside. Filling it up for area. All you do is multiply your length and your width. The area of this one's going to be 21. Oops. Sorry about that. There you go. Perimeter's distance around, area space inside. Perimeter, we're adding up side lengths. Area, we're multiplying 2 things together, a length and width, or base and height. I'm going to go on to number 15. I know some of my kids are still looking at this. In 15, I've got a triangle. 15, E, F, G. E is at 6, -2. There's my E. F is at 6 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my F. G is at -1 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my G. Now, oh, here's a ruler. There we go. I'm going to have to use distance formula to find out how long G to E is because it's not vertical or horizontal. I can't count it. Let me count the GF and FE sides, though. G to F is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And F to E is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And actually, the how far apart's on my X and Y's. When I want to go get G to E, this is the relationship between, I was talking about how distance works the Pythagorean theorem. if you guys take a look at what's going on here, if I've got to get G to E, point G is, where's my XY table? Point G is sitting at -1 and 5. Point E is sitting at 6 and -2. You guys should notice something about these how far apart. They're both 7. The how far aparts here are both 7. Exactly what I counted for. What's the horizontal change? What's the vertical change? So that's square root of 49, or I'm sorry, yeah, square root of 49 plus 49. So GE is going to be the square root of 98. And that should be somewhere close to 10. 9.89, that makes sense.